What's the best job for a lazy person? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. A guy on the surveying crew has the job of watching a surveying GPS unit all day. He gets dropped off with the unit, sets it up and sits there and makes sure it doesn't get stolen and that the blue light is still on. That's all he does every day, day after day. He thinks his job is the greatest thing ever. Story 2. Sysadmin, I dislike my life. I've automated 85 of my job. I'd be shocked if I worked more than 4 hours on an average week. It sounds great, but fudge, it's boring sitting here surfing tomorrow's Reddit today. Answer. It sounds great, but fudge, it's boring sitting here surfing tomorrow's Reddit today. Have you thought about doing something better than Reddit? Read some books, learn new skills or a language. Watch Netflix. As a sysadmin, I am expecting that you can get around any content filters or bandwidth limitations your company has in place. If not, in the category of learning new skills, maybe start with that. If watching movies or whatever would too obvious to others around you, it still seems like there are many more productive, fulfilling, non-boring things you could do with your excess time. Story 3. A lot of IT-related office jobs at big companies involve a lot of downtime for one reason or another, where you're just sitting around waiting for work to come in. Just be careful what you wish for. I did a 6-month work placement at a place doing QC on medical data entry. It was as riveting as it sounds. And due to poor management, there were massive stretches of time, like more than a solid week, where there was nothing for us to do. We were literally begging for work because we were so fudge bored. If someone had asked me to start hoovering the carpets, I would have jumped at the chance. Creative IT jobs like the video games and special effects industries are major exceptions. Answer can confirm. I work at T for a couple car dealerships, and it was literally just me checking out Reddit, waiting for work to come in. I maybe had an issue once or twice a week that took me no more than an hour to figure in most cases. The only reason it's work now is because they decide to open up more dealerships that I have to manage, and everything needs to be set up. There are a lot of things to do now. Sigh. Was good while it lasted. LOL. Story 4. I worked as a security guard for a trucking company on the weekends. The rest of the company conveniently didn't work weekends, so I had the whole place to myself. I worked 12-hour days and walked around a small wing of the property every hour and documented anything that was out of the ordinary. Almost nothing was ever out of the ordinary. Other than that, I didn't do anything. It was actually really boring because the guardhouse was outside of the Wi-Fi area, so I blew through my phone data really fast. To cure the boredom and ease my phone bill, I bought a portable DVD player and watched every DVD I had. Story 5. Security guard. Source. Been on Reddit the whole shift. Edit. Now on my next night shift and so many notifications and even 2 golds, just to answer a few questions. It's a shipyard facility. During the day, it's checking out bags and cars coming in and out, giving temporary passes and few phone calls. Night shift. What can I say? Reddit, cable TV, or Heroes 3 on my shoot old laptop. Work schedule. Day shift, night shift, then 2 days off. Story 6. The person that sit on a chair in the museum. They just sit there in one of the most quiet places I visit. And when a person stands too close to one end artwork, they just cough a little and tell you to step back. Story 7. I'm a backstage doorman at a Broadway theater. I sit around watching Netflix and Hulu and all that shoot all day. If I'm feeling ambitious, I'll read a book or write some stand-up material. It's a pretty sweet gig and perfect for the laziest of people. Story 8. Back in college, I was a computer lab monitor. I just had to sit in the lab and once every hour count the number of people there. If I was opening or closing the lab, there was about 15 minutes of work for that. But otherwise, I could just surf the web or do my homework. Answer. I had this job in college. I did 2 things. Toward the end of the term, periodically yell, if you are on Bebo, Facebook, or any other non-academic site, please make room for students that need a computer. The printer also had a green button that needed to be pressed once a paper tray was depleted, so it would draw from the other tray. There was a sign above the printer that said this, a sign on the printer that said this, and a sign by the queue to the printer. Still, it'd constantly have to deal with this issue. The printer's not working. Did you press the green button? Yes. So if I go over there and press the green button, nothing will happen? Yes. Inevitably, it'd press the green button and it would start printing away. I still have no idea why this would always happen. The failure to read and then the lying about having pressed the button. But as far as jobs go, this was pretty sweet, though more busy than a parking lot security guard, which is what I came in here to suggest. Story 9. Copy editor. You can pretty much work out of your own home and be a professional grammar Nazi. Pay is meh, but it's really not bad once you build up a client base, since you can literally sit on your jerk for hours if your grasp on the language is strong. Edit. I should probably clarify. I do this part-time after I get home from my main office job. I consider it lazy because I can sit in my own home office and dedicate what time I wish to it, and it requires no specialized equipment besides a laptop. Answer. I used to be a copy editor at a newspaper. Great gig. Worked 4 p.m. to midnight, so never had to set an alarm. Never had to take my work home or deal with emails or phone calls at home. Steady, predictable hours, except in the very rare event of an emergency. Almost no meetings, no need to network or schmooze with leadership or go to any company events, no complicated long-term projects, no need to work in teams or collaborate. Just sat there listening to music, drinking coffee, reading interesting articles, and fixing stuff if I felt like it. Those were the days. Story 10. I used to go to the factory where they make giant rotating machinery for power plant generators. It would take a week or more to machine these giant discs, and the machinist just sat there watching this giant computer-operated machine do all the work. If an error popped up, the machine would stop, sound an alarm on the computer, and the machinist would pick up the phone and call an engineer to come fix it. Also, they didn't do any of the removal or setup. That was done by a team of engineers and transport folks. 30R. Story 11. Find a remote data entry job and outsource it to someone who will do it for cheaper. Let them do your job and just collect the difference. Story 12. I'm an analyst. I taught myself a bunch of stuff and spent a bunch of time automating things because I'm too lazy to do them every day, week, month. Answer. I was hired as a Unix, Cisco, desktop, Cat 5 tech, all-around admin with very little experience. The first few months were 60 hours WK at least. As I learned the job, I automated most of my tasks to where I had about 30 minutes workday. I spent much of the rest of the time working on a primitive news blog, earning a few extra 100-month W Google ads, or taking long walks around downtown thinking of a work problem so as to call it fair. My news blog actually hit page 1 of some Google searches. Darn, should have sold when it was hot. It's dead now. Story 13. My job. I make the ballistic fiber that goes in bulletproof vests. I basically just watch movies and play on my phone all day long while the machine runs. As long as everything goes smoothly, I have around 5 minutes of work to do every hour and a half whenever the machines is ready to run new packages. And I'm on break half of the day too, because we do 1 hour on the floor, then swap out with our relief for an hour. So every other hour, you're on break for an hour. And I have a 2-hour lunch. I make $30.23 an hour and all the overtime I want. Story 14. I worked at a pool the summer after my senior year of high school. I wasn't a lifeguard. I just had to have the person show me their Navy card to get in the pool, and I had to check the pH levels of the pool at the end of every day. Only had to text my boss, could be on my phone the whole day, chilled with my then girlfriend, and ate food. Didn't even have to clock out for lunch and got an extra half an hour every day. The downside was working in the hot sun. You'd be under an umbrella, but the job could get boring. Edit. I should also add most of my friends were Navy kids whose mothers or fathers were working, so I would be able to chill with them all day too, because it was their neighborhood. All in all, pretty good gig if you're lazy. Edit 2. Also, one time me and my friends were there, and there was a live skunk in the pool filter. He was trying to swim, so we took a pool net and gently pushed him into it and let him down in the grass outside. He was just laying on his back, panting frantically. Then he jumps up and runs in the woods. I have it on film on my old iPhone Edit 3. Wow, 1.6K more people like this job than I thought. Guys, you really don't want to work at a pool, LMAO. Answer. I worked as a pool attendant for a hotel one summer when I first moved to Chicago. All I did was read, tan, and do fantasy football mock drafts all day long. Ended up making friends with some tenants, and they even brought booze out to me a few times. There was also a gym right by the pool, and I'd work out when nobody was around. However, now, I'm an insurance broker at an extremely chill company. When there's no work, I can do whatever I want. Plus, we get wined and dined a few times a month. Got really lucky with this slacker job upgrade. Story 15. Corporate job. They typically give you work they think will take a week. It does. You're just slowly trotting through it in between useless meetings and Facebook. Story 16. Truck driving. And not in a bad way. I drove a semi for a few years after the military, and it is by far the best job for low-energy introverts. You get paid to do nothing other than stare out a window and listen to music podcast radio. You have to get out every now and then for work, but you won't be doing any back-breaking work, and it won't be longer than 10-15 minutes at most. Best job if you like to be alone and not really have to do anything. Plus, it pays really well. Answer: I really considered going that route for a long time, even if it meant leaving my relatively cushy, though repetitive and entry-level call center job. I love driving long distances, listening to music podcasts, and seeing the country. But I know the OTR schedule would be hard for me and my wife. Plus, all this talk of automation has me scared the job won't be around for much longer. I'm still always on the lookout for some kind of job that would get me out of the office and on the road, but for now, I'm just a desk jockey. Story 17. Financial aid officer at a college university. Those are indeed the slowest, laziest, and inept people there ever were. Story 18. I own a out-of-home phone repair business. I repair maybe 2-3 phones a day. Takes roughly about 30 minutes each. Then I either play games or relax in bed the rest of the day. And that keeps me going well. Answer: been thinking of starting a home PC repair. I'd really like to work out of my house, have all the equipment necessary, live in an area where people have caught up to technology so they have phones, tablets, PCs, etc. But as far as they are aware, they run on magic and fairy dust. Figured out my expenses, and at a very competitive price, I could literally make more than my current job, banker, by fixing 2 PCs a day. And by fixing, I mean, in my experience, blowing out the case, maybe cleaning up some cables, run MBM and SBSD, and then browse Reddit for the rest of the day. But god darn, I love having good health insurance through my work, since I live in the United States of become destitute after health crisis. Story 19. Hurricane debris cleanup crew safety monitor. This won't apply to you unless you live in a place where you are hit by hurricanes at least once a year and don't minding working 12-hour days, 7 days a week. I promise you that 10 of those 12 hours per day will be spent sitting there, doing nothing, playing games on your phone, if the battery lasts long enough. I switched to crossword puzzles to try and save my battery. Keep in mind this job only exists immediately after a hurricane hits and then for about 4 or 5 months afterwards, depending on the strength of the hurricane. You will get time and a half on the final 44 hours of the week, so you essentially get paid for the work of someone who has 2 decent entry-level jobs without actually performing anywhere near that amount of work. Answer: I don't remember my actual title, but I worked in infrastructure repair. Basically, all the extra labor they'd bring for critical things like the power grid, damage to bridges, overpasses, etc., had to sleep somewhere near where they were working, which meant cots in gym chestons. My job was actually to set up, tear down the cots after pickup delivery, which would have been a time-consuming nightmare if I ever actually did that. First pickup on my first day, I showed up early with the truck during breakfast and met with the guy who ran the site. He saw me and my buddy walk in, goes, "Where's your crew?" "It's just us, sir. You two are going to break down all these cots, load them up, then unload them and set them all up again?" "Yes, sir. Unless you want to have my guys do it, it'll take you all day." 200 to 300 guys will have it done in 2 minutes. We're on the same page. So I showed him how the pallets needed to be loaded. He made the announcement, and for the next 2 months, we did an average of about 90 minutes of work a day, most of it driving. We were on call 247 for some reason, so the gig was 15 HR, 247 straight time, no OT, and was FEMA funded, so there was no tax burden. We also had cots in an office building to sleep on, and were fed 3 square in the cafeteria. Occasionally, we would have to make a drop after hours, but we always had a heads up the day before. Basically, it was $2,500 net week with 0 expenses and no surprises. We got paid silly money to goof off and shut down the bar when we didn't have a morning pickup. Story 20. Automation design. Been doing it for 26 years, and my laziness has advanced my career more than anything else. I dislike doing anything twice, so if I have to do it once, I do it in a manner that the next time it's needed, it handles itself. Story 21. I'm currently working as a companion for rich old folks with early stage dementia. Their kids feel guilty for not spending time with them, so they pay me too much to go to the old folks' home every day, hang out, drive their fancy cars, and go out for lunch. Most don't wake up till after midday, so I do whatever I want all morning. My old guy now likes to go to this expensive restaurant every day for lunch, full on 3 courses with a bottle of wine, which to be honest has become a bit much for me. Every few days, I send the kids a happy smiley pic of the old timer having a good time, and they get the warm fuzzes. I'll drive the Jag or Rolls, get them a paper, but don't do any personal care at all. It's a sweet gig. Story 22. I'm sure this will likely be lost in the other awesome jobs, but I once had a job that required maybe 10 minutes of work a day. Essentially, it was my job to rent people mobility scooters. I'd sit in a small room surrounded by different colored scooters, and I'd just read or watch movies with my feet up because we had maybe 2 or 4 customers a day. If a person came in for a scooter, I'd ask for their name and postcode, write it down on a piece of paper, and give them the keys. When they came back, I would, usually an hour or two later, I'd charge the scooter by just plugging it in. That's all, the entire job. The work really slowed when the local government started charging for the formerly free service. Then I'd maybe see 3 people a week, and they paid me $8 per hour. Story 23. My job, I'm basically ignored by everyone and wasting all my day on Reddit. I'm starting to wonder how long it will last. Story 24. Get an office job. Figure out how to do it in a fraction of the time. Coast for a couple of years. When a coworker quits, tell your boss that you can add their responsibilities to yours instead of hiring a new person for a 40 raise. Figure out how to do that in a fraction of the time. Get all your work done every day and also spend hours on Reddit. Bonus, literally nobody else knows how to do your job, so they'll think long and hard before downsizing you. It helps if you understand Excel or whatever your office uses more than anybody else in the company. Story 25. It ain't a game tester. People think it's a fun and easy job, but tracking down the precise instant a bug happens under what conditions is a painstaking, tedious, and time-consuming task. Story 26. I just quit my job because it was too boring for me, but it paid 70 grand a year and had full benefits, and I spent 7 out of 8 hours a day on Reddit. Do tech support for a medical device company that makes a good product. Story 27. Alert orders for military. Just chill in a bunker all weekend and play video games and eat and work out. Then get a 5-day weekend, get paid regardless because salary pay. Story 28. One time I had a sweet gig as an overnight caregiver for a sweet old lady neighbor of my mom's friend. She lives alone, is around 90, super mentally and physically with it. She just gets scared at night and likes the company. I would go over at around 8 p.m., watch Dancing with the Stars or whatever with her, discuss current events, and would usually end up going to bed before her at around 11. She didn't mind as long as I was in the house. I would wake up and have breakfast with her, then leave around 7 or 8 the next morning. She paid $100 night. I did this for a while when I was preparing for my NCLEX and for a bit after I passed. I had to leave because I got a job as a camp nurse, and then I ended up moving and getting a real job, so I didn't try to get that job back. I hope she's still alive and that someone else is filling in as well as I did. They were some pretty big, lazy shoes to fill. Story 29. In college, I was the substitute proctor for a standardized test company. They would hold practice exams and I would just say start, set an alarm, and say end when it was done. That was basically it. Didn't have to look for people cheating, because if you're paying $1,000 to take a class and you cheat on the practice exam, then that's on you. Easiest beer money in the world, and I gotta do work or read during it. Story 30. It depends on what kind of lazy you are. Work hard 1 to 2 decades and chill for the rest of your life lazy, or wake up at 11 a.m. and go to work at 2 p.m. kind of lazy. Someone in my family works as an anesthesiologist and another as a neurophysiologist. Both work literally 10, 15 hours a week for $150K, $225K a year. They worked hard through their education and got lucky at parts. But the payoff is being lazy retirement capable by age 40 if you're willing to retire to a cheaper country, or 60 if you invest, save well, and want to stay in the States. Alternatively, some of my laziest friends, gamers, potheads, work remote as software engineers, web engineers. This work is task-based and relatively independent, depending what company you work for. And if you seek out projects for startups, small growing companies, you also get to try your luck at making it big with pieces of equity here and there. Answer. I have always been fascinated by anesthesiologists. I taught the kid of the one who was my wife's anesthetist during her C-section for our youngest, and we chatted about his job. He said it was only really exciting 10 of the time during some risky surgeries. It's not like the TV shows. He loves what he does and is stupidly smart about it. If I could do any other job, it would be that. Story 31. Cigarette testing. I couldn't imagine sitting at a table for 8 hours with a guy going full Hank Hill handing me rolled chemicals. Story 32. Not sure if it qualifies, but I used to oversee gas pressure on an outlet on an oil rig. I just sit there for 12 of one a day for up to 4 weeks at a time. Nothing ever happened, and if it did, there wouldn't be much time to act accordingly. It'd just be the first to know that we would all die very soon. Story 33. Working at a visitor center along an interstate, my buddy works at one along I-15, and he just sits in a chair and points things out on a map to people all day. He basically is on one long break. He steps out back whenever no one is around and tokes his e-pen. So basically, he sits in an air-conditioned little room and tells people where cool spots are and fun things to do on their trip. Plus, you get to meet all sorts of interesting and creepy people, all while being baked off his jerk. Story 34. I lucked out massively at uni. I responded to an ad to build an alumni website that had a few unique features. During the interview, they asked how I would build a specific feature, and I basically said, I'm not sure, I'd have to do some research. Apparently, every other candidate had arrogantly said they could do it easily, and it rubbed up the interviewers the wrong way. I literally got the job because I said I wasn't sure. It was amazing money for a broke student, an hourly contract rate way higher than my previous bar retail work. They were happy for me to work from home, providing I sent them updates by way of various documents and prototypes. I basically clocked and shoot ton of hours as I could just fire up my laptop when I had some free time and crack on. This went on for ages. Unfortunately, the PhD project managers found out they were not allowed to carry on with the project, and the funding was pulled. I basically built a shoot ton of hours, got to hack some code whenever I had time, and I never had to finish the product. It was easily the cushiest gig I've ever had, and absolute gold as a student. Sadly, bills had to be paid, and I had to pick up some regular work, which was also awesome, but no way this good. TLDR hired for a programming gig because I didn't know what I was doing, was allowed to work whenever I want from home, and ultimately the project was canceled. Got to learn some awesome stuff and got paid good money to do it. Story 35. I'm a videographer. Most of my work is recording depositions. I show up a half hour early, set up, hit record when they want to go on the record. Then I mail body part around on Reddit till they're done. I'm at one now. Story 36. Lifeguard at a retirement complex. I did this every summer throughout high school and university, and never once did I have to intervene or do anything. My regular clientele consisted of 4 old ladies who would meet each morning to chat and sunbathe, and one very fit old dude who would swim laps at the end of the day. I suppose it would have been more work if any emergencies had actually happened, though. Story 37. Member of the local assembly in Northern Ireland. It's government positions which have been on a holiday for almost 3 years, full pay. Story 38. What are some good websites to use to apply for these kinds of jobs, though? I never know where to look. Story 39. The job is, you have to hold up this sign, and you have to make sure it points in the right direction. Now, does that sound like something you can do? Sounds like something a lamppost could do. Flight of the Conchords. Story 40. Airline pilot. I take off and literally go to the back, eat a steak, and then go to sleep. Then come up later and sit there and read a book, then land and go eat at some restaurant in Europe. Story 41. I worked as a personal shopper for a couple of years, and it was the chillest and easiest job I have ever had. It was part of this app website, so I worked remotely from home, basically just Googling things for people and trying to find the best price. I actually found it through Reddit in one of the job subreddits, and it was a small startup company that had only been around for a few months. I honestly don't know how it lasted as long as it did, because we didn't charge for our services. And although we had partnerships with many companies and websites, sometimes we ordered through eBay and Amazon since they would end up being the cheapest option. We also didn't have that huge of a customer base, and most days were super slow. It was pretty nice for me. Got paid 16 hours to basically just watch TV all day and wait to see if we had any requests, most of which wouldn't even take that long. They finally ended up closing last year, but it was an interesting run. And if anything, I am really good at finding deals for myself now when I want to buy something. Story 42. Early in my career, I was a county adult probation officer. I got assigned to a town of 3,000 people. The local justice court wanted their own PO assigned, and the judge wanted me to live in the town. It was slow to say the least, but my last year was almost work-free. The average PO has a caseload, if 60, 80 probationers. I had 2, and I'd see them once a month. With seeing them in office, a once-a-month home visit, documenting my efforts in court, I worked maybe 5 hours per month. My boss said I could stay home if I wanted, but I had to have my cell on. For a year, I probably put in less than 60 hours of actual work. Story 43. My brother wants to get this job where you review YouTube content, so you sit and watch YouTube all day, and then rate the producer and write a very short review that can be as short as 1 sentence. Story 44. I am a very lazy person, and I work as a leasing consultant. It's fun, I basically go into people's apartments and show them to people who want to rent. I also work as a dog walker and do personal care visits with seniors where I just chill with them. Story 45. I was a security guard in a closed link belt factory in Chicago. This building took up 11 city blocks. It was freaking huge, 12-hour shifts. This was in 1975, so no mobile phones, computers, and DVD players were the size of ATMs. There was only one room in this place that had heat. It was the power room for all the overhead cranes. The temperature, even in the summer, was in the 40s. You had to wear a jacket. In the winter, it was colder than the outside freezing temperatures. The floor was oil-soaked wooden blocks, which I shoveled up in a 55-gallon drum and set on fire for heat. But on the plus side, the power was still on to the cranes that ran on a rail at the top of a 70-foot ceiling. I got pretty good at 55-gallon drum bowling, using the crane hook to swing into the barrels. I was a student, and the pay was good. There was plenty of study time. Story 46. You can grow up on a farm and then join the Navy because you think it's less work than farming. They'll want you to do a lot of work at the Naval Academy, however, which you can get out of by studying lots of math, so the leadership will think you're a geek with geek potential rather than a jock with command potential. Then they'll offer you a chance to fly a plane because you can't be stupid and fly a plane, and everyone knows you're good at math. But flying a single-man plane is lots of work. You have to be at 100 all the time you're in the air, so you can transfer to big planes with multi-man crews and co-pilots. And since all your co-workers really want to transfer out of big planes because they're not flashy and heroic, you keep getting promoted and promoted until you're the first person in your class to make captain. Eventually, since you know everything there is to know about big planes, by being the only officer in the entire Navy who's flown them for an entire career, you start inventing new stuff that makes even less work for yourself. Stuff such as autopilots and navigation assistants. Then a war breaks out, and you figure the safest thing to do is to fly rescue missions in your flying boat picking up downed fighter pilots, which paradoxically allows you to garner decorations for heroism. Then after the war, you retire honorably as a junior admiral, known for your amazing exploits as the man too lazy to fail. If you know where this is from, post a reply and I'll give you an upvote. Story 47. I used to work for a juvenile delinquent camp. My job was to sit in or by the cabin overnight and make sure none of the kids ran off. The job requirement consisted of radioing in once an hour, writing no issues or latrine on each kid's log sheet, and keeping yourself awake. It paid 50 more than a fast food job, and as long as you did the job, you could do pretty much whatever you wanted the rest of the time. Biggest catch was there was no power and up to a half-mile hike to the cabin. Story 48. I've talked about this guy before, but we have a specific security guard we've had for 13 years now and is pretty useless. The security guard lives there and has a TV. He watches telenovelas most of the time. All he does is open the gate and doesn't even bother to even inspect though. Since according to his logic, 99 of people who can afford a car aren't bad, harmful people. He doesn't ask names or house numbers, just opens the gate whenever he sees a car. Anyone can come in if they have a car. He doesn't even inspect faces. And do you know the worst part? When moving into the Privada, you are supplied with your own control remote. The gates are also automatic. Story 49. Field engineer. Hear me out. Field engineers are often salaried and are given territories with a list of things that need completed as well as their due dates, and barring a few emergency callouts. That's the full scope of their work. Or if they're of the flavor of FE that I am, energy distribution, they do global work but only have seasons where they are busy and occasionally deal with callouts during off-season. So as an FE, you spend a few months out of the year busting your jerk and working long days, and once the busy time ends, you sit at home for weeks and play video games, or do whatever you want while collecting a paycheck. I just spent the past 12 days binge-watching DBZ, replaying Persona 5, and storyboarding my webcomic. You can't really be lazy until you actually become a field engineer, though. Something about being responsible for multi-million-dollar equipment and such. Story 50. BuzzFeed listicle author. All you have to do is post a question like, what's the best job for a lazy person? To askreddit and copy-paste the best responses. Story 51. I'd say unemployed, but honestly, it's an assload of work to keep benefits, and the stress level is higher than any job I've ever had. So I sadly can't recommend it. Story 52. My girlfriend worked for the local park, which had a soccer field with huge light posts. She went in at 6 to 11. She had to turn on the lights when it was getting dark and turn them off at 11 when the park closed. So yeah, getting paid 5 hours to turn a switch twice. She would do homeworks and watch Netflix while working. Story 53. Conspiracy theory. This was collectively posted by upper management of some big firms to see what jobs they could potentially eliminate and save themselves even more. Story 54. Front desk agent in Nunavut. Surf the internet for 9 hours a day and make $60K a year. I really miss that job. Story 55. I once worked for a company that had a major database replication every night. Sometimes that replication would fail. If it did, they wouldn't know until morning, and then all of their reports would be wrong, causing quite a bit of chaos. They promoted me to the software team because of my limited SQL skill. But for the first few months, my only job was to literally watch a progress bar to see if it stopped moving for more than 15-20 minutes, then call and wake up the DB admin if it did, so they could debug and restart the replication. No one else was in the building at this time. Not even security. I literally brought my 360 in and played MW2 every night, all night for 2-3 months before the day shift showed up. Since the optics would be bad, even though I had literally no other responsibilities in the beginning, I just packed everything in my backpack and left. Eventually, they realized I was much more valuable than that, and I got a great deal more responsibility. But that was a pretty crazy, lazy few months. Story 56. My job right now is to make sure that hard drives are wiped properly. I literally just queue a hard drive to be wiped with a kill disk, then put it in a shredder. Takes 30 minutes to get them started and 30 minutes to shred them out of an 8-hour day. Story 57. The guy that had to censor movies and music from the West during the Cold War, that guy just sat and watched movies all day. Story 58. My job. I run a chemical plant that does the chemical preservative treatment for utility poles. My job is 10 technical, 10 work, and 80 playing my Nintendo Switch and browsing Reddit. In a busy night, I will spend 2 to 3 hours working and the other 9 to 10 chilling playing video games. Sometimes I'm on a long, automated cycle and do no work at all my whole 12-hour shift. I make good money and am licensed by the state to do my job, but I literally make $60,000 a year playing video games. Story 59. I had it. When SC had a form of legalized gambling, they had places all over the NCSC border. They would sometimes have themes, mine did, but most were just buildings with rooms that were 4 posts to outline what a room was, because you could only have 5 machines per room. I was a room attendant, and the room area was only big enough 5 machines and 5 people in a chair for me to sit. Someone won money? I yelled for someone else to go get it. They wanted food? I yelled for someone else to go get it. My job was to watch people to make sure no funny stuff was going on. I would talk to them and was their little helper. I cleaned the machines, which took all of 10 minutes, and I worked the 3rd shift, which meant that during the week, there were times I had 0 people, and that was pretty common. We weren't allowed to sleep, but if you had a room that had an actual wall, the manager couldn't see you. Everyone there smoked plant substance and drank. Weren't supposed to drink on the job, but everyone smoked plant substance on the job. We'd all take turns going out back and getting blazed. Then when we were off at like 8 a.m., we'd go party at someone's house and get plastered. If you had someone win big, you'd get crazy tips. I had a guy hit 5,000 on a machine, then move to another and hit for 3,000. I made about 1,000 in tips that night alone. It was glorious and unfortunately short-lived. I had a girlfriend at the time and a lot of disposable income. I kept her so icy, she looked like a fudge igloo. Story 60. Programming. It's not a job where you actually get to be lazy, but having a mindset that somewhat resembles that of a lazy person goes a long way to teaching you to be efficient and to keep code tidy. Although, be careful not to be too lazy and spaghetti everything. I'm still fixing the mess a coworker who hasn't been here for half a year left behind because they just wanted quick solutions and to be done with the code. Story 61. IT analyst specialist, aka the firefighter. My job consists of picking up departments or companies that have trouble with their IT and make it work again. Was hard to get the hang of things at first, but now it's just going in, talking to people, making things work, enjoy the vacation until the next client comes in. Story 62. Locksmith. Locks are at a convenient height, so you don't have to bend down or get on a ladder. You generally work on locks in business hours. Locks aren't outside in the cold and rain. Locks are not physically demanding. You don't have to get dirty digging large holes in clay, and it's useful skill to have. Story 63. Believe it or not, being a commercial pilot is a pretty lazy job. Yeah, you have to get up early sometimes, but once you're in the plane, you can just put it on autopilot, kick back, have a nap, read, something like that, and you can get the flight attendants to get you food or whatever for free. Story 64. I'm probably Reddit average in intellect, and I went to a small school where I was smart enough to skate by with no homework and high test scores. So I picked up a lot of bad habits, laziness, that didn't do me any favors in the real world. I've found that the more I'm forced to apply myself at a job, the happier I am in general. Not saying that's the case for everyone, but it's definitely been my experience. Story 65. I work in master control at a TV station, which used to be a really stressful, active job, switching tapes and timing out commercial breaks and all that. But nowadays, everything is automated. So I've got about 30 minutes of actual work. The rest of the shift is just waiting for something to go wrong so I can fix it, which hardly ever happens. Maybe a couple times a year. So realistically, most of my workday is just browsing Reddit and/or playing games on my phone. Sometimes on weekends, I'll watch Netflix or stream baseball or something like that. Story 66. Learn a BI visual suite like Power BI or Tableau or something. Get an analytics job for a small to mid-sized company. Automate their reporting, analysis, and all that. From here, you can choose to coast or bank that work and excel farther. I have been very successful doing this. I love my job. There are still challenges, but I feel that I can take any pace I want. I choose fast-paced and hard work to learn more, but I could just as easily choose slow pace and still be very productive. Just an example. We had to do monthly reports for our retail division, quarterly reports for our food service division, monthly customer reports, and a weekly Walmart report. Each report either took roughly a day to prepare because of how specific everyone wanted them. Cost an outside agency $18,000 a year to provide them. I automated this stuff to the point where I just have to manually initiate the data downloads. Too lazy to set up and constantly tweak a headless browser or something like that. Aside from the roughly 5-8 hours report I invested working on building reports, setting up equations, managing queries, meeting with stakeholders to see what they want reported out, it only takes me a total of about an hour per year total for all combined reports. The good makes me shine. The bad makes the guy before me, who's still here, look like he was just dragging his heels. Story 67. My neighbor one day asked me to recommend a job that would pay a minimum of $3,000 a month and would require as little as possible. I replied that if such job does exist, then persons in it will keep it to themselves. Story 68. I just want a 24-28 HR a week job that pays decently for a simple life. X200B. I literally would rather dig canals in 35 degrees C for 24 HRs than sit for 40 HRs in an ACE'd office doing virtually nothing. X200B. For me, it's just about the hours, but all I see around me are jobs where one works a lot, require skill and pay good, or jobs where one works a lot, do not require skill, but pay shoot. And I did them all. For the last 6 years, I changed 5 industries, working 50, 100 or jobs. Currently, I am working a 45 HR job, 5 HRs of commute weekly. X200B. I talked with this with my psychologist, and I just can't explain how much I don't care how much the work is meaningful, hard, easy, engaging, or whatever. I just want the hours to go significantly down while earning a livable wage. And by livable, I mean living frugally. X200B. However, all I hear is, you are lazy, you are unmotivated, you'll never make it with that mindset, etc., etc. Make it to what? I don't want a fudge villa, be a CEO or whatever, or even a manager of something. Fudge sake, just a simple and peaceful life. I sailed the 7 seas and I've seen more than most, and I found what makes me happy. Living frugally with my fiancé, having time to do my hobbies in peace and make love to her, and to always have a good night's rest. Fudge off with the rest. 200B BTW. Last but not least, I would like to mention that I did all my work obligations always dutiful and went always above and beyond, and turned down several better paying positions during the years because they meant more hours worked, often significantly. Because I believe that if I have to be at work and people rely on me, I could as well give my best. However, my stance on work does not change. X200B. I am also willing to put some savings aside in the next month's year to get a master's degree in any field that would ensure me such a job. I am not lazy about that and working towards that one goal, but I do not want that goal to be 10 years away, TBH. X200B. Edits. Word stuff. Story 69. Kurt von Hammerstein, German general in the interwar period, gave us the following quote. I divide my officers into 4 groups. There are clever, diligent, stupid, and lazy officers. Usually 2 characteristics are combined. Some are clever and diligent. Their place is the general staff. The next lot are stupid and lazy. They make up 90% of every army and are suited to routine duties. Anyone who is both clever and lazy is qualified for the highest leadership duties because he possesses the intellectual clarity and the composure necessary for difficult decisions. One must beware of anyone who is stupid and diligent. He must not be entrusted with any responsibility because he will always cause only mischief. Story 70. When I was a tech, we needed an adult worker at Microsoft, and this guy opened a door and was supposed to make sure we don't screw anything up. He read comics and played games on his phone and watched us work. He probably got paid similar to what we were making too. Story 71. One of my first few jobs was working at a mom-pop jewelry thing. She sold exclusively online, so we just went into this dark, cluttered office space to assemble jewelry. You would sit for 8 hours in a little cubicle, surrounded on all sides by towering boxes of beads, and casually assemble 2,200 necklaces, bracelets, and earrings a day. It was very easy work, and I liked collecting up the beads off the floor to take home and craft with. She rarely checked in on our progress, since she was too busy sitting alone in her office going on racist tirades against bad online customers while listening to Rush Limbaugh talk radio. I didn't work there long, and she's since been shut down for refusing to pay employees, but I have a nice selection of handmade glass beads to show for it all. Easy work, kept you somewhat engaged. Story 72. English teaching online. Anyone with an AA willing to do a TESOL certification, a few hours depending on how good a learner you are, or anyone with a bachelor's can teach Chinese kids online for $20 an hour. This is what I do as a college student, and I can choose whichever hours I want and can call out 5 hours in advance with no penalty. The class just gets passed on to another teacher. I get paid to work in my pajamas for decent money. Note to mention the students are absolutely adorable. I had a girl no older than 3 in almost perfect English tell me, "Teacher, my brother's name is Hamburger." So I mean, that alone justifies the work. Also, stock trading, not technically a job, but penny stocks are great money if you do your research, and stock apps like Robinhood allow you to trade stocks for free and give you a free stock if you register from a referral code. PM me if you want a code for either. Story 73. Okay, so I worked in demolition for a while, and on many sites we had to have security guards watch footage overnight to make sure no one snuck on site to steal break anything. Let me just say, with all the security companies we've had, only one actually looked at the footage on most of our sites. We'd come back the next day and notice something missing broken. We asked the security if anyone came on site overnight, and they never said yes. Although when we even checked back on footage, there were people there. 200B. I swear you can just sleep while being an overnight guard for this shoot and not get reprimanded. It's so stupid. Story 74. I am a secretary for a kind of small sales company, to keep it vague. I sit in the office, normally completely alone, and wait for the phone to ring. It rings maybe 5 times a day. I take a name and phone number and pass it on to someone else to handle. There are a few other tasks, but nothing that takes up even 18 of my day. Story 75. Night audit at a small hotel motel. Light accounting work with occasional interactions with guests, but mostly you get paid to stay up and watch Netflix. Story 76. Union elevator operator. Just need to be on time and fairly safety-minded, but otherwise a great, simple, well-paying job. Story 77. Off-duty police jobs. But you gotta work as at least a reserve officer in my department. My off-duty jobs are usually sitting in a lane with my lights on, while behind an arrow board for companies that need a lane closed. Also, interstate closures, which is big money. The surface street jobs pay $55 an hour, usually 4 or 5 hours a shift, and the interstate jobs are between $55 and $70 an hour, per 10 in HR. The interstate jobs are overnight, so no one is around to bother you, and the only thing that you have to watch for are DUIs because they love running into PD cars that have lights on. Story 78. Help desk support working from home, 3rd shift. Being without a family, I was totally okay with just working nights. Working nights isn't bad for your health if you keep your schedule constant, so it won't affect the amount of sleep you get. And my manager would thank me every time I came in for meetings for doing what other people didn't want to do. I literally did an hour or 2 of work a day. Probably an average was 1 hour and 15 minutes of work. I played video games the rest of the shift, studied for certifications. The best part is, though I never talked about it, I just said I read during downtime, it's no secret that 3rd shifters play games to stay awake, and the manager has talked about it as well. Oh, but the catch is, like a lot of these lazy jobs, you have to put in the work consistently so that your company trusts you to not be lazy if there's actual work to be done. My numbers were really high, and I was consistently flagged as a no bullshit, He'll do any work you need him to, kind of guy. They wouldn't trust someone with poor numbers to go remote. Story 79. I work at a vape shop. I literally sit in a comfortable chair and watch Netflix. Someone comes in every hour or two. I'm also in college and do about 90 of my studying and homework here. Story 80. Doggy daycare. Depends on where you work, but I worked at a veterinary clinic as the only person running the new doggy daycare program. I'd have to set up in the morning and in 10 minutes, clean and sanitize in the evening, 20-30 minutes depending on what chemicals I used that day. The rest of the day was either playing with dogs, usually only 10-20 minutes until they fell asleep, or watching them sleep for the other 7 hours. I had no idea how incredibly boring most of the day would be when I took the job, but since I was alone and in the back of the clinic, they let me listen to music and I'd bring in crosswords. I loved the dogs, but the day dragged on once they got tired. Also, I was amazed at how many people would bring in aggressive, defensive, might be a better word, dogs thinking I'd be able to train them or something. Since it was a new program, the clinic wouldn't turn anyone away, so I would get bit a lot and have to attempt to convince the owner that I'm not a trainer and not to bring the dog back. I quit after about 6 months and started working in a different animal-related field, where I'm running around doing things outside all day. Story 81. A famous guy once said that you should always try to hire a lazy person because they will find the fastest and easiest way to complete the task. Story 82. In general, I'd almost always hire lazy people given the chance. I am exceptionally lazy, and this is why it's the best. 1. I always find the most efficient way to handle a task, so I do the least amount of work. 2. I always do it right the first time so that I don't have to waste my time doing it again. Most fellow lazy people I know are the same. Lazy doesn't mean incompetent or stupid. It means you don't want to do extra stuff. I still got to eat, so I do my job. The laziness makes me done fast and done right. I love sales because most companies don't care what you're doing as long as you hit targets. So I'll crush a few days a week. I can stay home and play games and do nothing. Story 83. Freaking Steve's gig. He works for a small security company that sends employee to clients' locations at night to watch stuff that they set up outside for the next day's event. But most of the jobs he gets sent to are private, fenced area, so there he goes sitting on his phone all night. Story 84. Journalist. Seriously, if you like writing, it's great. There are some grindwork stories in Waikuna, but most of the time it conforms to this quote, my all-time favorite journalism quote. A newspaper is not the place to go to see people actually earning a living, though journalists like to pretend they never stop sweating over a hot typewriter. It is much more like a brothel, short, rushed bouts of really enjoyable activity interspersed with long, lazy stretches of gossip, boasting, flirtation, drinking, telephoning, strolling about the corridors, sitting on the corner of desks, planning to start everything tomorrow. Each of the inmates has a little specialty to please the customers. The highest paid ones perform only by appointment, the poorest take on anybody. The editors are like madams, soothing, flattering, disciplining their naughty, temperamental staff, but rarely obliged to satisfy the clients personally between the printed sheets. From a UPI Washington Bureau manager. Story 85. I have a friend that works at a rope factory. His job is to sit around and wait for the spool to run out and then replace it. He works 4 10-hour days every week, so he gets 3-day weekends. Story 86. Working the midnight shift at a 24-hour pharmacy. I got paid $70 jar to sleep, watch Netflix, play video games, read and check a handful of blister packs. It wreaks havoc on your sleep cycle, though, so I had to quit it eventually. But those shifts were great. If I could quit my current full-time job and do that just 3 days a week, I could make a very livable wage doing much less work than I do now. Of course, you have to go through years of pharmacy school and have a few years experience under your belt to be able to work those shifts, but they were the best. Story 87. I worked a gas station for a couple years. In Oregon, it's illegal to pump your own gas, so there's the need for fuel attendants. All you had to do was ask regular or premium, then hit the specified fuel button and run it to the amount they want. You get hazard pay. Was making about $16 an hour for pushing a button. Story 88. Computer operator in a knock. I had almost no responsibilities. I was to sit at a computer and wait for error messages. When an error message came through, I had a piece of paper with the codes and the corresponding person to call. I would get errors at most once a week. Rest of the time was surfing the net. Overnights we would play TF2. Story 89. Bookkeeper accounts clerk. No one actually knows what you do. Most of it can be done in a couple of hours a day if you're vaguely competent, set a few systems in place, and the rest of the day you're free to surf the net, do whatever. Everyone leaves you alone, especially if you get in the habit of asking them for receipts or to sign things every time you see them in the first month. Keep a pile of invoices on your desk. Practice a harried look until it's your default state. No one will bother you ever. I wrote very bad fan fiction, chatted with online friends all around the world, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week for most of the past 20 years of my working life. To switch it up, I nowadays watch YouTube videos, cruise Reddit, while chatting to online friends, my husband at his job. Story 90. Remote programming. You don't have to leave your house or even get dressed. I guess it depends what kind of lazy. Would you rather commute to a job where you do nothing or sit at home doing a lot on your laptop? Story 91. Get a job at one of those kiosks in a low-traffic mall, the ones that sell cheap phone cases or something similar. You'll make minimum wage and maybe interact with a half dozen people a day. I mean, if that's your life goal, then enjoy. Story 92. I'm late to post, but I used to work at a PVC pipe factory. My department consisted of 2 or 3 two-person glue teams. Our job was to glue up large PVC pipe fittings up to 24 inches. For instance, if you don't know much about pipe, we would glue a 45-degree spigot and a 45-degree socket to make a 90-degree elbow. We had to place the spigot and socket ends in large vats of primer, which would soften the PVC and make the weld along with the glue when put together. One guy's only job was to take a butter knife and lightly etch each PVC part as it said in the primer to make sure it was soft enough to make the connection. That was his only job, and he didn't have to do anything else except push a broom in the last 10 minutes of the day. On the days we ran 3 teams, we would work fast, so he had to essentially run back and forth from each station until he would complain to the boss, and we were told to slow down. Has still does his job and has been doing it for about 15 years. I did it for a few 8-hour shifts every now and then when he was gone and was about ready to off myself by the end of the day. It was so boring. Story 93. Engineer. I write 2-3 lines of code, execute them, and then I browse Reddit for the rest of the day from my living room. Story 94. I remember there were a position listed in Oslo as a robotic lawnmower guardian. Under qualifications, it said you needed to be able to chill in a deck chair under a parasol all day. Also, experience with sunglasses, sunscreen, and opening and closing a parasol are preferable. Story 95. I'm a night auditor for a hotel, fancy term for a front desk at night, and I watch Game of Thrones during my shift. While there are occasional noise complaints, guest requests, and Expedia agents calling you, it's pretty much quiet during my entire shift that sometimes I feel pressured of doing something productive. Right now I'm studying Japanese. Story 96. Go work for a big corporate. Do work, which you do mostly on your own. Get a really shoot continuous improvement development job that's on a standstill for years, where they constantly do the same, expect a different results, and continue with blurting out random things about it without even trying. Been there. Came close to doing that. Such job grinds my gears, but for a lazy person, not easily bored is great. You basically can't fudge up, won't be held accountable anyway, and can plan your own agenda. Take 3 half-an-hour shoot a day. Sure. Go to the office abroad, get partied too hard till 4 o'clock with the other colleagues that don't give a fudge and show up at 11? Sure. Story 97. Night auditor at a non-chain hotel where you're the only person there at night. It's my job, and I fudge love it. The front door automatically locks at 11 p.m., so all I have to deal with is guest emergencies, which almost never happen. Story 98. Pigeonhole yourself in a big corporate company. Be that guy who is good at one task, but nobody else knows what else you're supposed to do. Hide out, attend meetings, never ask questions, and do the one task they tell you to do. Or you can luck out and be one of those guys you hear about who somehow got put into a department with no manager or project, but continue to get checks every 2 weeks from the company. Story 99. Not a stable job by any means, but there was some exhibition at a modern art museum, and they needed twins. So me and my twin brother spent 3 hours sitting on our jerk, trying to look artsy and interesting while being paid $50 an hour. Easiest job I've ever had. Story 100. My job is a minimum wage menial job, though, not an actual job to live alone. I work a clerical job at a law firm, and ever since my boss died, I basically have so much downtime. My job is basically go to work and sign in, go to the P.O. box in the post office, buy milk at the grocery store every time the milk runs out, then go back to work, open the mail, stamp the mail with a date, then sit on the computer until a secretary asks you to do something. Story 101. I worked at a dry cleaner for a year, and it was the easiest job I've ever had. 95% of my job was studying on my laptop, reading books, or playing games when I didn't feel like studying. The other 5% was talking to the rare customer, dropping off, picking up their clothing. I've got a knack for remembering people's names, so it was pretty easy to greet them by their name after they'd only been in once or twice, and that got me a raise and a promotion to management. Pro tip, don't accept a promotion when your job lets you get paid to sit and read, study, and play games. Story 102. Had a buddy who worked at a prison, so he just had to sit in a room with a big window, and if someone needed help or was causing an issue, he called in the guards. His main objective was to push a button to open the door out to change guard. He couldn't read or anything but had to keep watch. Story 103. I have a feeling a lot of the replies are going to say YouTuber or something like that, but I just have to say, a YouTuber doesn't spend 10 minutes doing whatever their hobby is before uploading it each day. There's a lot of behind the scenes that goes on. Even though their videos are 10, 15 minutes long, it can take 7, 8 hours of work a day, which is absolutely exhausting. So for all who answered YouTuber, no. Just no. Story 104. I know this isn't going to be the answer you want, but if you pursue an easy or lazy job, any room for movement in the company is kind of shot, because usually the company is aware it's a cake job, and they just need someone there, like for overnight security or something similar, meaning that it shows low ambition and you will be passed over for a promotion. Story 105. I used to work at an after-school program as a side job. Took 4 hours out of my day, 5 days a week. First half hour was free play, which was basically watching kids play with their friends. I'd always find a way to get involved since I liked playing sports with the older ones, but on the lazy days, it'd just be on my phone playing Drawing with Friends or whatever that new app at that time was called. The one where you get a phrase and you have to draw it and send to your friend who had to guess. It was just peaking in popularity back then. Then after that was an hour of homework time, which consisted of Netflix for me and yelling at kids if they weren't doing their homework from the comfort of my own chair. Last hour was also free play. If any kid got hurt, I just redirect them to my team lead. Job stopped being a lazy one when I became the team lead, LOL. Story 106. I'm a power engineer process operator. It's what Homer Simpson does. So that's kind of a good laziness marker. Story 107. Probably an unpopular opinion, but the president of faculty back when I decided I'll do computer science told us uncertain boys something along those lines. Computers can help us automate things so that we humans can think of better things like art or whatever. This made me think that being lazy, something I'd actually enjoy, would be making the world a little bit easier for other lazy people. And of course for me. So you may want to try computer science. Keep in mind that you must like math at least a bit, but keep also in mind that math is really badly taught up until university. I used not to like math until the very last year of high school, when we changed teacher and she focused more on concepts rather than formulae and pure calculations. In university, I was lucky too. In my continuous course, not so much in the discrete one, I began to like matrices later. Anyway, if you want to fastly and lazily try out what the fuss is all about, if you haven't already, try out Python. Very easy to understand for anyone, very useful, even if you become a computer science, not some tuned down thing for beginners. Story 108. High voltage switch man. You sit around until there's a power outage. When there's a power outage, you go out and flip some giant switches, then come back and sit around again. Pay is $85K a year. Story 109. I used to work in classified work areas for the government. When there is a need for construction or any work where third parties have to enter the protected space, there need to be escorts present at all times. So you need to have a squeaky clean background and top secret clearance, but you essentially sit on your jerk and watch other people work all day. Story 110. I do payroll administration at a major university hospital. I do no more than 15 hours of work in a 40-hour week. No degree necessary. Story 111. I used to work overnight shifts at an adult content adult toy store maybe 10 years ago. Start at 11, usually you'd get a couple dudes renting DVDs in the first hour, then just sit around for the next 7 hours. Get really high, maybe vacuum and straighten shelves to eliminate some time. You'd maybe get one customer a night, so I really had to work to keep myself busy. I used to build little figurines out of office supplies. I had an army of eraser pigs and an army of binder clip dinosaurs. Eventually, I started bringing my guitar to work and would practice scales and write songs. After a while, they stopped being open 24 hours and eventually went out of business. Those were the days. Story 112. I was a conference services assistant. Over on summer I spent at school. Sat at a desk in different dorms where the conferences that came to campus over summer would stay. 4-hour shifts, could sit and watch Netflix, play games, etc. Worst thing was getting night shifts, 12:44-8. Sometimes I slept during those. They would get pissed if people slept during M. But it's ABS college job. Who cares? Hardest thing I had to do was communicate with Spanish students who wanted me to order them pizza. Story 113. I worked overnight at a nursing home as a housekeeper. I was the only one. Every resident was sleeping by the time I started, so I couldn't clean their rooms, and all the nurses and CNAs kept to themselves. I was supposed to clean all the floors of this Huggy building and do the dining rooms, but in reality I spent about an hour and a half cleaning the floors I knew would have noticeable dirt on them, and the rest of the 7 hours watching Twitch, YouTube, or doing homework. I miss it so much, LOL. Story 114. I went from working in kitchens to working in a vape shop so I could concentrate on my mental health. Best decision I've made in a long time, even with the severe pay cut. Story 115. Worked for the county in college spraying ditches. One was supposed to drive while the other turned the spray nozzles on and off. We would just take turns. One would drive and do the nozzles. The other would sleep and switch every 2 hours or so. Think I made somewhere around 15 nawash an hour and didn't work Fridays. Story 116. Firefighter, though you can't actually act lazy, but it can be a lazy job with naps being routine. I work as a firefighter paramedic in a firehouse that has a ladder and engine company. The engine and I go on maybe 5 runs in 24. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you'd like to see more content like this, you might be interested to know that I've created another channel with a similar theme, especially for those of you who enjoy what I do. I'll leave a link in the description, and I hope to see you there. Take care. Redditors who grew in poverty and are now rich, what's the biggest shock about rich people you learned? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. That rich people can afford to do things that save them money. Better health insurance and car insurance with lower deductibles. Higher quality food that keeps them healthy. Gym membership preventing future health incidences. Prompt car maintenance to avoid big repair costs down the line. Higher ed for better paying job. The list goes on and on. Answer, it's like the story of the boots. Poor man buys a pair of boots for 10 because that's all he can afford. Rich man buys a pair of boots for 75 that are better made. Poor man's boots wear out after 3 years, causing him to need to buy another 10 pair. That's all he can afford. The rich man's boots last him for 20-year farners. Poor man ends up spending more money than the rich man in the long run because he cannot afford the nicer pair of boots that will last longer. Story 2. More like lower middle class to upper middle class. But it blew my mind when I realized many people I know now frequently pay to have their house cleaned and grew up thinking that the cleaners being over was just a routine part of life. I was probably in my late 20s the first time I ever paid someone to clean. Same with things like moving, painting, house maintenance, stuff like that. I'm at a place where it makes more sense to save my time and pay for many of those things, but anytime I talk to my mom and mention it, she assumes it's something I'm doing myself because it never would have occurred to her to spend money on that. And for most of her life, she couldn't afford it. It's a pretty interesting divide just between the strata within middle class. Answer, I am literally spending the holiday weekend painting the parts of my house I don't want to pay someone else to do. I have an old house and used to work in historic home restoration, so I can't stomach the